is the double star block. It's 12-inch finished. Here is the diagram. We have 2 sets of flying geese, then we have squares and rectangles. Here is a sample of what the blocks might look like if you alternated the colors. Patch A is a 2 by 4 inch finished rectangle. We'll cut 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches, and we need 4 patches. Here are the AccuQuilt dies you can use for this. All of the AccuQuilt dies you can use will be listed down here on the sides. Patch B is a 2-inch finished square. We cut 2.5 inch squares. We need 4 of the dark fabric and 4 of the light fabric. Patch C is a 1/4 square triangle 4-inch finished. We are going to use this for the flying geese. That is the geese portion of the flying geese, the larger triangle. We'll cut 5 1/4 inch squares, and if you're sewing the patches, we're going to cut it twice diagonally in half to make 4 patches. And that's what we need for the dark and for the light. We're going to do the 4 at a time method to make flying geese. So since we're doing this, we're just going to cut the square the same size, and we're not going to subcut it. So this tells you here that you need either 4 patches or 1 square. The 4 patches are if you're just sewing the patches together. The 1 square is if you're making the flying geese 4 at a time. Patch D is the sky part of the flying geese, and they are 2-inch finished half square triangles. If you're making patches, you cut a 2 7/8 inch square, cut it in half once diagonally, and you'll get 2 patches. If we're doing the 4 at a time flying geese, then we'll just cut the squares at 2 7/8 inches and do not subcut them. You'll need 8 patches or 4 squares of each of the fabrics. And finally, the last patch is patch E. It's a 4-inch finished square. We cut 4.5 inch square. We need 1 patch, and this is the large patch in the center. To piece this, we're going to first make the flying geese 4 at a time. So we'll have 2 different sets of flying geese. Then we're going to stitch the flying geese together to make the side unit. Then we'll stitch together the corner unit and then stitch the block together. Now here are the fabrics I've chosen. This is patch A, the rectangles. This is patch B, which are the squares that go in the corners. These are patch C, which are the 1/4 square triangles, and these are the geese part of the flying geese. So we have our 2 squares. These are the large squares when we're doing the flying geese. Patch D are these squares here. So we've got 4 squares because we're doing the 4 at a time. So we have the 4 squares of the light and the 4 squares of the dark. And so these go here with that, and these go with that. So we will use these 2 to make the flying geese. 4 here and 4 here. Then here is patch E, which is the center square. Now I'll show you how to do the flying geese 4 at a time. For flying geese 4 at a time, you need 1 large square and 4 small squares. The large square is the geese part of the flying geese, and the small squares are the sky part of the flying geese. On the back of each of the small squares, draw a diagonal line. Place 2 of the small squares like this on the large square, right sides together. You line up these edges and make sure these lines line up. Then you're going to stitch 1/4 inch on both sides of that drawn line. Here are the 2 stitching lines on either side of the marked line, and now we cut it in half on the marked line. Now you'll open these up and press your seams open on both sides. Cut off the nubs. Now you'll place another square in this corner. Here's your diagonal line, and stitch on either side of the diagonal line. And do that for both of these. When you're stitching, your stitches should come out or start right at this point, this intersection here, this 90-degree angle. Cut this in half on the diagonal line, and you have these 2. Press your seams open and cut off your nubs. And do the same for this one. 4 flying geese. One thing I use to help me with my flying geese is this diagonal seam tape. It's tape that you put on your machine. You can see it's been well used. I need to replace it. You just buy it on a little roll and tape it down. The black line here is your guide, and in this case, if I have my diagonal line is drawn, so I'm going to leave the diagonal line right on this black line, and then the red line is your stitching where your needle is. You can see here how close it is. Here's the diagonal line I drew. Here's the angle here. So I'm a little bit off, so I stitched it right in the angle so it would come out flat. Another tool I use to get better accuracy is the simple 7/8 ruler from Creative Grids. It has 7/8 inch markings on it. So it starts here with 7/8, then 1 7/8, 2 7/8, all the way up to 10 7/8 on this side, and then 4 7/8 on this side. It takes the guesswork out of trying to find that 1/8 inch because these markings are your 7/8 inch markings, and it's just really accurate. And if you're going to be cutting a lot of triangles or a lot of squares and cut them into triangles, or even the squares we used for the flying geese, they're cut 2 7/8 inches in this case. This is a great tool. You can look in the description below the video to find a link for more information on these. Now here we have our flying geese units are finished, and we've sewn them together like this, and that's in the instructions. And I wanted to show you, when you sew these two together, put this brown one on top, and when you stitch, you'll be able to see where the point is here. You want your stitching to go right above that point. So when you open this up, you'll have a nice pretty point. And now we're going to do step 3 of the instructions, and that is to piece the corner units. They're very simple. This is 2 squares. We sew the 2 squares together, then sew the rectangle next to it. And we'll stitch 4 of these. So the squares will go like this, and then the rectangle like this. And press your seams open. Now we have our corner units finished, and we have our side units finished, and here's our center unit. And we'll just put them together on the proppet board. Sew the units into rows, 3 rows, then sew the rows together, and the block is finished. When you're sewing these units together, you'll want to have your points meeting here so you don't cut your points off. And in this case, we're going to stitch right here on this point, but we want the point to match this seam line. So here is how you do this. And I'm going to turn it over. For this part, where it's just a seam, I'm going to estimate 1/4 inch, or just eyeball 1/4 inch. And I'm going to put my pin right in there, right on the seam line, 1/4 inch down. If you want to, go ahead and measure it. Then I'm going to take this other one, and I'm going to put my pin right here at the tip of this point. Put that pin in, and then if you put the pieces together, you're going to match up the top edges, and then you're going to hold it like this, and you see that pin is perpendicular to the fabric. You want it to be perpendicular. If it's like this, your points won't match. So you want it to be perfectly perpendicular. Then put the pin in. Now as you're stitching this together, you start here 1/4 inch, and as you come down here, you're aiming for this part where the pin goes into the fabric. It may or may not be 1/4 inch. That's why you start here and you're just aiming for this 1/4 inch. And once you stitch there, I usually pull the pin out right before it gets there, and then make sure your edges are matched, and just continue from this point and then stitch 1/4 inch down and out. And then your points will come out like this. Thank you for watching.